All right. Go ahead and get started here. If you got your questions, go ahead and post them. Should be below the screen if you're on a smaller screen, or below the video if you're on a smaller screen. To the right of the video if you're on a larger screen, like a computer, something like that. There's no new questions in there as of yet. Actually, we did have one, it looks like from Alan. Alan Queso says, would you discuss plumb bobbing and whether it can be used effectively for reading the break on greens, long, and more importantly, short? Thank you. Yeah, I don't think plumb bobbing is a very effective way to read greens. It's not something that I use, not something that I really recommend or teach people to use. So I can kind of go through my green reading method. So for me, what I like to do, move some stuff around here. So let's say I've got this putt. So even before I get to the green, what I like to do is kind of look at the overall kind of landscape of the green, the overall slope and everything of the green. So it's hard to see when you're standing on the green. So what I like to do is, as I'm walking up, I like to kind of see, you can see much more easily kind of the overall slope of things. So that's the first thing that I'm doing. Then when I get on the green, I'm going to get behind my ball. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to fix my pitch mark or whatever if I have one. But I'm going to get behind the ball 10 to 20 feet. I'm going to kneel down and I'm going to try to kind of see. I'm going to try to get as low as I can. As I get older, it gets a little bit harder to get lower and lower. I'm going to get as low as I can to kind of see the overall kind of slope, see what I can see, right? Now, those first two parts with my eyes, I don't really rely on that as much. I just use that to kind of give myself a general idea. What I rely on the most for reading greens is my feet, what I feel in my feet as I walk around. So once I've looked at it as I'm approaching, and once I've got on the green and looked at it from behind 10 to 20 feet, and to go back to that, you want to be a good distance behind the ball. I see a lot of people, they'll get directly behind the ball, like 1 or 2, maybe even 3 feet behind the ball and kneel down. That's not really going to help you because you're only really going to be able to see the slope that might even be past the hole, right? So really you want to read the green that's between the ball and the hole. And if you're standing right here, right, you're not going to be able to see that. So that's why I recommend that you get behind it as much as you can, 10 to 20 feet, somewhere in that area. So once I've done that, I'm actually going to mark my ball. And as I'm kind of cleaning my ball and making sure that it's good, where I'm going to do and where I do the bulk of my data gathering is going to be when I actually walk around the hole. And I do this no matter how long the putt is, right? So I'm going to mark my ball. I'm going to grab it. I'm going to start kind of cleaning it, make sure it's all clean. Make sure that you're clean, that you are not putting balls with dirt. Don't leave the dirt on them. The ball will not roll very well if it's got a little bit of dirt on it. So make sure that it is clean as possible, right? So what I'll do, sometimes if I got mud on there, I might lick my finger and try to make sure that I'm like rubbing it off, getting it off there. I want to make sure that I have as clean a ball as possible before I put it back down. But as I'm doing that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk around it, right? And as I'm doing that, I'm feeling in my feet. I'm feeling, is this sloping right to left? Is this uphill, downhill, right? That's what I'm feeling in my feet. The other thing that it's doing is I walk the perimeter of the hole, is it's giving me a better sense for how long the putt is. You can pace it off. I used to do that, but I didn't really. I did a test where I would pace it off and I would tell myself, okay, this is, if it was, 10 paces, that's a 30-foot putt, right? I used to do that. But I find that if I'm counting, I'm not able to focus as much on, I'm kind of a person where I can't walk and chew gum at the same time. So I'm not going to be able to focus on the slope of the green if I'm counting the actual distance. So I actually did a test on myself where I played when I went a while where I would count the paces while I was doing it. And then I did one where I didn't. I actually putted better when I didn't count the paces. But when you walk the overall, you walk around the hole from the ball to the hole, it gives you a better overall sense of awareness for how long the putt is. Because I used to not do that. And then, you might have like a 40-footer, and you, in your mind, from what it looks like, because your eyes can play tricks on you and things like that, it may look like a 20-footer, or it may not look like it's long, or there may be an uphill portion of it that from where you were standing, it did look uphill, and then you're leaving it short. Or maybe there's a downhill portion of it, and then you get up to the hole and you realize, oh man, it all runs away from you from here, and you ran it 10 feet by or something like that. So that's why I like to walk the perimeter of the hole, because it gives you a better sense and awareness for how long the putt is, and also gives you a sense and awareness for, okay, I'm going up and I'm going down, I'm going left to right. So now I'm getting up here. And also when I get up by the hole, I can look at the grain, and I can kind of see what direction the grain is going. So the grain, you can tell what direction the grain is going by, if you look at the hole, there's typically going to be a clean cut side of the hole, and then there's going to be a side of the hole that looks a little bit rougher, right? The side that is rougher, that's the direction the grain is going, right? Because it's going to go, the side that's cleaner, it's clean because the grain is going that way, right? So the side that's rougher, that's the direction the grain is going. So I find I have found, and this is just what I found with putting, just testing stuff out and things like that. I don't find that it really makes that big, so let's say the grain's going left to right. I haven't found that it makes it that big of a difference from like a left to right perspective. So if you have like a left to right putt and then the grain is going to the right, I don't find that it's really going to break much more to the right. If it does, it's really minimal. It's not a huge amount. Or if you have a left to right putt, and let's say the grain's going left, it's not really going to break much less. It's going to be fairly minimal. It's almost negligible in my experience. Where I have found where it does seem to make a difference is where you're putting into the grain or against the grain, right? So let's say you have a downhill putt, right? And that's all with the grain. Well, that's going to be a wicked fast putt. It's going to be a really fast putt. Let's say you have a downhill putt that's into the grain. It may not be as fast as what it seems like based on what you're feeling in the ground. If you have an uphill putt that's into the grain, it's going to be super slow, more slow than what. And it makes sense, because if you think about it, you're really going against or with something the whole way. It's going to make more of a difference. Whereas if you're kind of going across the grain, it just doesn't make it as much of a difference as you might think. So I wouldn't play too much into going across the grain. What I would pay more attention to is into it or with it. All right. And also keep in mind that the grain can change. Like up by the hole, the grain can be going one direction, and then where you're standing, the grain can be going in a different direction. The grain isn't going to always be going in the same direction on all parts of the green. So that's another thing to consider. That's why we have to realize that making a long putts is really luck. If you make a long putt, it's really just luck. Now, getting to where you are in a position where you're getting close a lot, that's skill, right? But if you actually make, a 15 plus foot putt, that's more luck than anything else. You can hit an absolutely perfect putt and it doesn't go in. So I would, if you're rolling good putts, I wouldn't worry about it too much. It's not like, if you're not making all your 15 footers, if you're rolling good putts and it's getting pretty close, you're doing well. It just might be, you're just having some bad luck that day. You might go another day and it's like you can't miss, and you're really lucky that day. So that's just how it works. But so yeah, pay attention into the grain or with the grain. That's what I pay attention to, and realize that it's really more of a big deal if you have a downhill putt that's with the grain or an uphill putt that's into the grain. That's where I found it really makes the biggest difference, because the speed is changes quite a bit with that. All right. So now I've walked around the hole, right? I'm going to come back and I'm going to put my ball back where I marked it. And now I've gathered all this information, right? I've looked at it from a distance. I've looked at it from behind the hole. I've walked around it. I've got a sense for in my feet. That's where I've gathered the most information. That's where I'm trusting the most. I'm going to get a general idea from what it looks like, but I have found that your eyes can play tricks on you. Now, you might be a little bit different. You might find that your eyes really see really well, see the breaks and everything really well. Me personally, no. I get it much more in my feet and walking around the green. So it's kind of a to each their own like that in that regard. But you're seeing a lot more of this on the tour when you see people using like the aim point method. The aim point method is completely predicated on what you feel in your feet. It's entirely predicated on that. Now, I don't use the aim point system. I use it as a tool, or I use my feet as a tool to give myself a visual. I'm not using that because to me it seems too fickle. My visualization for myself is better than doing this, in my opinion. So not to say that aim point is bad. I think it could be a great tool for a lot of people. But for me personally, my visualization is much better for me. So like I said, once I've done all that, I've gathered information. You may even think about wind, right? If it's a windy day, that will affect the putt. The time of day, the green's soft, or are they dewy? Are they really dry? Are they hardened up? Are they dried out? Those sorts of things. Those are all going to play a role in how fast the putt's going to be. So once I've kind of gathered in all this information, right, I'm going to get behind the ball a few feet, and I'm going to make a couple visuals of how I think this ball is going to roll. So I'm thinking about how this ball is going to track, to the hole. So let's say this one's going to break left to right, right? And I'm looking at a visual of how much it's going to break. And when I'm doing that, I'm actually looking at kind of like spots and imperfections on the green of where I think the ball is going to kind of roll over, right? And if it's a longer putt, what I'll do is I'll choose a spot that's like a foot or maybe 2 feet at most in front of my ball. So that way, when I line up, right, I can kind of line up and kind of get this ball to kind of roll over that spot. And then once I get lined up, I can just kind of pull the trigger. But I'm looking at how this ball is going to enter into the hole. So now that I've got that visual in my mind, now I'm going to step in here. I like to step in with my left hand on my side here, my right hand on the putter. And what I'll do is I'll just kind of nestle it in here. And this just kind of helps me to kind of open things up and see the line. And then once I kind of get the line where I want it, now I'm going to kind of get settled in and put both hands on, right? And then from here, all I'm thinking about is the stroke, that I'm going to need to make, the power that I'm going to need to give this to get it to roll the distance that I want it to match my visual, right? So it's like what Tiger talked about. His dad told him to putt to the picture. And basically what that means is you've got a picture in your mind and you want to perform the action that's going to match the picture. So putt to the picture. I think that's really, really great advice for putting. And obviously Tiger is one of the best putters, if not the best putter of all time. So I think what he thinks about it is definitely something that I would, wouldn't take lightly at all. So I'm going to get in here. Like I said, I'm going to get set up, right? And then I might give 1-2 looks. And then once I do that, I'm going to let it go, right? And you're not always going to be 100% right. Sometimes you're going to make a bad read. But if you go through that process and you're pretty consistent with it, you can be a good putter. You can at least have a good consistent routine. You can be a good green reader for sure. So it's definitely something to practice. One way that you can practice this is to just take one ball, go to your practice putting green, and go to different distances. Try an 8-footer, right? Go through your routine. Choose a different hole, choose a different distance, set it down, go through the whole routine again, and just keep practicing that over and over and over and over again. That's a great way to get a feel for the routine. Now, I know that may seem like a lot. That may seem like, man, that would take forever. It really doesn't take very long, to be honest. Most of it is you're doing it already. Like it's not. It doesn't add any more time. So, for example, as you're walking up to the green, I could be daydreaming. I could be looking at my phone. I could be doing all kinds of stuff, but instead, it's not taking me any more time just to kind of look at the overall slope of the green, right? When I get up to it, when I get behind it and to look at it, right? So let's say I'm walking up to it. When I get behind it, I might be down there for a few seconds, right? It's not very long, and I'm not sitting behind it and looking at it for 2 minutes, right? It's kneel down, okay, right? That's I'm seeing what I saw what I needed to see, right? Now I'm gonna get it, I'm gonna mark it, right? And then I'm gonna walk around it. Now that part may take a little bit longer depending on how long the putt is, right? Obviously, it's gonna take a lot longer to walk around a 50-footer than it is a 10-footer, but you know that's just part of the routine, right? And yeah, so that whole process again, it's just the time of walking around it. Now I'm going to come back, I'm going to mark it, and then again I'm going to get behind it, and this is about how long I would take to visualize it. I don't know how long that was, but I'm guessing 5-6 seconds. I mean, I'm not standing behind it for 2 minutes and thinking about it, right? These are quick decisions, and you're committing to the decisions as well, right? So once I get in here, I mean, the whole process, once I get to the green, the whole process might take a couple minutes, right? But also, other people are doing what they need to do, right? And if it's, you could be kind of doing a lot of this while other people are doing their thing, right? So it's not something that takes forever, right? Now, if you're someone who really, really wants to play fast and play as fast as you can, you're probably not going to be a really good green reader, right? Now, if you play the same place all the time and you know how all the greens roll and all that stuff, that's one thing. You probably don't need to spend much time. If you play somewhere almost every single day, you probably don't need to go through necessarily this routine, or it could be really cut down. I mean, at that point, you could probably mark the ball, clean it, get behind it, make a visual of what you think it's going to do, put it down, and go for it, right? But if it's a course that you don't play a lot and you don't know the greens very well, that's a pretty quick process to go through. My home course where I play a lot, I know the greens pretty well. Now, if the pin's in a spot where I've never really played before, they're kind of maybe putting in a different spot, they haven't put it before, I might go through that routine. But if I already really have a good idea of what it's going to do, because I've already hit this putt 20 times in my life, right? I don't need to go through that whole process. I'll just kind of look at it. I already got the visual in my mind and go for it. So that way I can play faster. But it's nice to have a routine as well, especially in competitive play. So Gene K says, can you talk about junior golf and best ideas for development? Have 9 and 12-year-old. Yeah. So really, what I would do is not get them in too regimented. What I would do is try to teach them what it takes to hit a good golf shot, right? What are the fundamentals of a good golf shot, right? So the fundamentals of a good golf shot are making ball first contact, center face contact, squaring up the club face, and then having a relatively neutral path down to the ball. Keep it simple. Don't talk about bowing the wrist and all this stuff. That's not really going to help them, right? And this is actually good for most golfers, not just necessarily kids. You got to let kids be kids for the most part. But if you teach them what it takes to hit a good golf shot, and then you develop a process where, okay, you didn't hit the shot that you wanted there. What happened, right? Did you make ball first contact? Did you hit it in the center of the face? Was it, you kind of go through that process, and that way they can start making having an understanding of what exactly they did wrong. What you see with a lot of kids is they'll hit a bad shot and they'll have no idea what happened, right? They don't know what's going on. This isn't just children. This is full-on adults too, right? But they don't know what happened. So I would try to get them to understand what it takes to hit a good golf shot, and then what was off, get a way to develop a feel for what happened, and then you can start to come up with solutions to the problems, right? And you come up with the solutions together. You try to have them. So what do you think? What do you think we could do to? So let's say you have a junior that they keep chunking the ball, right? They keep hitting the ground behind the ball, right? Well, I would try to just have a discussion with them, like, well, what do you think we could do to get to where you're making contact with the ball in the ground at the same time, right? And see if they can kind of come up with a solution, and then try to kind of lead them to the solution, because they're going to make a much bigger, and again, this isn't just kids, but they're going to make a much bigger connection with something if they come up with it, a little bit on their own. Obviously, you're helping them. You're leading the horse to water, right? But if they come up with it on their own, it's going to stick way more. But if you just tell them, hey, you got to get a good weight shift, you got to shift your weight, right? They may not connect with that really well, and that may be something you got to tell them 100 times, and they still don't get it right. But if we try to have a discussion about it, and say, let's say they come up with something and it's not really right. Well, hey, let's try this, right? Let's see if that helps, right? So let's say they said, I'm trying to think of what would be, I'm trying to think of like a solution a kid might come up with. Maybe they say put the ball back in the stands, right? Let's say they say, normally they have it there. Let's say they put it right there, right? Well, now they come in and they really chop down on the ball, right? And you kind of explain, well, you think you really want to chop down on the ball like that? It's probably going to be, you might be able to make some shots better, but that may not be the best solution. So let's try to come up with a different one. Let's put the ball position back in the normal spot, and let's see if we can come up with a different solution. I think that is a way to help with it, but that's maybe not the best way to do it. So again, basically it's a learning process, right? To help them kind of learn what they need to do, right? So that's how I would go about it. Try to keep it fun, and like I said, if I would try to do drills that are kind of fun, try to gamify drills, right? If it's us adults, the boring probably doesn't bother us as much, but as kids, the boring is terrible, right? Boring means I want to do something else, right? So I would try to gamify drills, right? Try to put a competitive nature to it. Try to put, if you're doing chipping or putting, you get it in this, have like a hula hoop, or they actually sell like chipping training type stuff, where you just have like a circle that goes around, lays flat on the green. It's just like a circle, and you say, okay, this is X amount of points. This is X amount of points. And then just have like the kids like, okay, we're going to chip from right here, and let's see who can score the most points, right? And that sort of thing. So try to gamify things, try to make things fun, and they'll definitely be more into it. So Mike F says, can you explain how the wrists work for lag on the downswing? Does it max out at the top of the swing like it appears with pros and long hitters, or does it occur later in the swing? So what you're going to see with pros and long hitters is you're going to see it maxing out at lead arm parallel in the downswing. Some players, it may max out at the top, but it's going to be more or less held. So basically what you're going to see in the best players is at the top of the swing, they're going to have an angle between their lead arm and the shaft. It's typically going to be around 90 degrees. Some players it's more, less of an angle here. And then you're going to see in the downswing that angle actually gets smaller, right? So there's around 90 degrees. And then as I come down, you can see how that gets smaller to that lead arm parallel position. Then from there, it's actually going to gradually get bigger, right? As I come down to the ball. Some players you will see, they'll have this angle at the top, and then that angle will kind of stay to that lead arm parallel position, and then it will start to increase. What you don't see you see this in very, very few high level players, is a sharp angle or an angle at the top, and then the angle gets bigger on the way down. You very rarely, very, very rarely see that. You see it sometimes with wedges, but not with so like Max Homa, for example. If you watch him hit wedges, or Steve Stricker, you'll actually see it's a little bit of a controlled cast coming down. Like they are casting the club a little bit, but I would call it a controlled cast, meaning that they're coming into contact with still in a great position, right? But they're just throwing it out a little bit as they come down. But for a powerful shot, that's just not something you're going to see. Max Homa lags the club with his driver and all that stuff. So yeah, from the top to that lead arm parallel position, that angle is either going to maintain the same or get a little bit smaller as they're coming down. That lead arm parallel position, or sometimes it's a little bit later than that with some players like Sergio. Like Sergio Garcia, he's got a really sharp angle. It's a little bit past lead arm parallel. But most players, that's what you're going to see. If you want to work on lag in the swing, I'd recommend working through our top speed lag course. To get to the top speed lag course, click the instruction tab, then click the top speed lag course from there. So Mark says, hi Q, where in the downswing do the hands move the fastest? To be honest with you, I don't really know. I don't really know. And I think it's funny how I feel like there's been some stuff about that lately, about how that's really important. I just don't think it is. I just don't think it's very important. In fact, I was at last year at the PGA show. One of the long drive guys was there, and they were talking about hand speed and all that stuff. And they were talking about how if they, somewhere they were talking about how the hand speed, I feel like it was somewhere in this area where it's moving the fastest, they said. And they said if he were to actually think about trying to move his hands fastest at that point in the swing, it would actually slow him down, right? So I don't think that's a very good way to think about the golf swing. I think we need to stop thinking about the golf swing so internally and try to think about it more externally. So what that means is less about what your body is doing and more about what the club head is doing with the ball, right? And what the ball flight is. That's more what the external is. So what the club head is doing, and then how that's interacting with the ball to create ball flight. I think if we focus more on that, then we'll be in better shape, because you can move your hands perfectly, right? But if you do not make ball first contact, you do not make, because this is kind of going back to what I was talking about with the juniors, right? Teach them what it takes to hit a good golf shot. Keep it simple. It's really just 4 things. I know TrackMan measures a ton of stuff, but that's really it. You don't really need all that. Now, club head speed is nice to have, because that's about the power and all that. But if you make ball first contact, you make center face contact, you hit the ball with a square face, and you hit the ball with a kind of a neutral path down the ball, meaning you're not too much in to out or too much out to in, right? You have a fairly neutral path down to the ball. You will hit good golf shots. That's all there is to it. Now, some people might think about, well, what about forward shaft lean? Well, if you don't have at least some forward shaft lean, right, then you're not going to be able to make ball first contact, right? Because if I'm coming in and my shaft is like this, my club's going to bottom out before the ball. So let's say here's the ball, right? Let's see, here's the ball, and let's say I come in and I'm like this. My club's already bottomed out before it got to the ball. So I'm going to have a really hard time making ball first contact unless my ball is sitting up on the grass like it's on a tee. I'm going to have a really hard time making ball first contact. So I need to have, in order to have a descending blow down into the ball, I need to have my hands at least a little bit forward of the ball, right? Now, you can get more advanced and work toward hitting high and low shots, right? But master the fundamentals first. Master ball first contact, center face. And in that order, by the way, in that order is what's the most important. The reason why I say in that order, because nothing else really matters if you're not making ball first contact, right? If you're chunking the ball, it really doesn't matter if the face is square or not, right? If you're hitting 3 inches behind the ball, it really doesn't matter that much. If you're hitting 3 inches behind the ball, it doesn't matter if you hit it off the toe, right? So ball first contact is first. Now let's say you're making ball first contact. Well, your face and path don't matter as much if you're hitting it way off the heel or way off the toe, right? I have a lot of students, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the ball striking masterclass, but it's one of our programs that we have. And it really emphasizes these things that I'm talking about: the ball first contact, center face contact, face and path. There's what we call the big four. Clay calls it the big four in there. And I don't know how many people you get on there, they'll go through that first test where we use some foot power spray and we spray it on the club face, and you'll see all their strikes are way out here. And they're like, I'm really working on trying to get some forward shaft lean. That's really the last thing you need to be working on. You need to be working on making center face contact. The reason why you're 18 handicap is not because you don't have shaft lean. It's because now people don't know any better because they don't know, right? But that's what it comes down to. So really focus on those things, and that's what the top speed golf system. The top speed golf system is what's going to put you in the position to be able to do that, right? So our stable fluid spine course, right? It's the number one key to consistency. Well, why is that, right? Well, if you imagine if my spine angles are terrible, right? So here would be an example of a bad spine angle. Let's say I really sway my hips as I go up to the top, right? Well, if I really sway my hips and I'm like this at the top, I'm exaggerating, but you can imagine how it'd be very difficult for me to make ball first contact, because I'm going to have a hard time getting to my lead side to be able to have a descending blow into the ball. I'm going to have a hard time getting my hands ahead of the ball, right? Because I'm way back here. I have such a long way to go. And also, I don't have any leverage. If my leg's like this, I don't have any leverage to go that way. If my leg's like this, I have way more leverage to go that way, right? Because it's angled this way, right? So that's a big part of it. Let's say that, maybe I don't sway my hips, but I have a reverse spine angle where I'm like this, where my spine's leaning toward the target. Well, if I'm like that I'm going to tend to come way over the top and chop down in the ball. Now that's club path. That can affect my club face, right? That can affect my strike, because when I cut across the ball, it makes it more difficult to hit the ball in the center of the face, right? When I chop down onto the ball, it's going to make it more difficult to make ball first contact, right? Let's say that my spine angle is too far angled away. It's fairly rare, but every now and then we see somebody who's kind of like this, way too far angled away. Well, if I'm too far angled away, I'm going to swing too much from the inside generally, right? I'm also going to tend to hit the ground behind the ball, right? If I'm like this, my club's going to bottom out back here by my right foot, right? So we don't want to be too far angled away either, right? If my head is moving, if my spine angles are kind of like all over the place, right? If I'm like this, right, my head is moving. Now, the head can move a little bit. I think people read into that a little bit too much. They're trying to keep their head dead still. The head does move a little bit, but when it's excessive, it can be really difficult from a hand-eye coordination standpoint to kind of lock onto the ball, right? So that's part of it as well. So that's why the stable fluid spine is the number one key to consistency, because it has an effect on a lot of those things that I talked about. It has an effect on where you're hitting the ground. It has an effect on your where you're hitting it on the club face. It has an effect on a lot of pieces. So that's why that's really important. So that's stable fluid spine. I know it may be kind of boring. It's not the sexiest of things to work on, but it's very, very important if you want to be consistent. So don't skip that. Make sure that you're passing the levels. Make sure that you're doing that really well, because it plays a big role in that. Power turn, that's a big part of it as well, right? If I don't have any power, right? Let's say I'm striking it great, but if I'm only swinging 60 miles an hour, I ain't going to hit it anywhere. I might be hitting it very consistently straight, but that doesn't do me any good unless I'm playing par 3 courses, right? Because I'm just going to have a hard time getting to any holes. So even if you're playing a par 3 course, if you're swinging 60 miles an hour, you got a 200-yard par 3, you can't get there, right? You might be able to get there with driver, maybe, if you're lucky. Probably not with 60 miles an hour. So yeah, there's that plays a big role in it as well. So those are kind of probably the two main pieces I would make sure that you're doing really well. I know lag and straight line release and all that, that's the sexiest parts, right? Because when you look at your swing and you compare it to like Tiger's swing or like a tour player's swing, that's the thing that jumps out to people the most, right? Is they don't have as much lag as them, and they're not releasing the club in the same spot as they are, right? That's what jumps out to them the most. But what we don't realize is that your stable fluid spine, if I were to look at your swing, I'd be like, okay, well, you're not turning very much, and your spine angles are really what you're swaying your hips or whatever. You're not shifting your weight very well, right? Those are much more important to playing better golf. So that's why stable fluid spine, that's the first piece. Power turn, that's the second piece. The lag and the straight line release, that's toward the end of the top speed golf system, because actually they're just less important. They're not as important, right? So really focus on those first two pieces, and I think you'll be surprised with how much better you get when you focus on those pieces. So so yeah, I would be less worried about where the hands are the fastest, and I'd be more worried about where you're hitting the ground, where you're hitting it on the club face, where the where the club face is as you're coming down, as it open, close, that sort of thing. And then the stable fluid spine, the power turn are two courses that are really going to help you to get those to be in a better spot. And then our ball striking masterclass, another course that's going to help you. It's a skill level building course. It's going to help you to learn more about it, and then also drills to help you build your skill level, right? So that's why I'd be looking into. So long answer. That's kind of off the beaten path. I know that's probably not the answer you were expecting, Mark. But I think from the data that I've seen, there are YouTube videos on this. I think it was the Athletic Motion Golf guys. I think I want to say that they have videos on this, and I think what I've seen is that somewhere in this area of the downswing, like right around in this area of the downswing, where the hands are moving the fastest when they look at the best players. But it really wouldn't. It's not something I would be trying to actively try to get to where you need it to be, or where those players are, because I just don't see how that's really helpful. And maybe that's just me not knowing much about it. Could be, but I can tell you, it's only in the last year or so that I've even heard about people talking about hand speed, and at that. It's just another. It seems to me like another kind of gimmick thing that people are talking about. Now it could totally be like a discovery kind of thing, where now we're discovering what really matters. But those things really, Tiger didn't. I can guarantee you, he's not thinking about hand speed. I would tell you that a vast, overwhelming majority of the best players in the world are not thinking about hand speed and where their hand speed is whatsoever. Some of them might be curious about it, but I just can't imagine any of them are really working on trying to get their hands to be as speed at a certain point in the swing. I would say it's more of a product of just kind of doing the fundamental things correctly. All right. We got not quite 20 minutes left. If we have any more questions.
All right, we got about 15 minutes left. If we have any more questions, if not, no worries. All right, so Robert says, I hit fat shots. What's the single most important way to avoid that? Well, there isn't one single thing. It's more about I can kind of take you through kind of what I typically do. Basically, it'd be kind of a complete guide. I'm actually going to make a video on this soon. Kind of a complete guide to fat shots. All right, so let me get my video back here. So first, ball position. All right, I know that may seem trivial, but a lot of people tend to struggle with this. Ball position, if this stick represents kind of the middle of my stance, so saying that this is directly equally between my heels here, I want the back of this ball to be on that stick, right? So that's just slightly forward of the middle of the stance. And this is basically for any shot that you're hitting off of the ground. That's what I would like to see. Now you can play it a little bit more back than that if you want, because a lot of this, I think that a lot of people move their ball position based on the club that they're hitting. But I would look at it more like I'm going to move my ball position based on the type of shot that I'm trying to hit. All right. So if I'm trying to hit a normal kind of stock shot, that would be kind of be my ball position. If I'm trying to hit more down on it and to keep it lower, right, I'm going to put it a little bit back, like a ball back of this. So a wedge shot would be something that I would do that with. I'm going to try to hit down on it a little bit more and keep it lower, so that way I can keep the spin but have it come out lower. That's going to give me a little bit more control. If I want to hit it a little bit higher, right, I'm going to move it about one ball forward of that, right? So it's a little bit forward, right, of the middle of my stance, but it's not so far forward that I can't still make ball first contact. What we have to understand, to make ball first contact, we need the bottom of the swing to be in front of the ball, right? So if we imagine with my hula hoop here, if I have this hula hoop, right, the club comes down, and if we imagine my hand is the club, it comes down on an arc, right, and then it works back up. The bottom of this arc is referred to as the low point. We want the low point of that arc to be in front of the ball and slightly below the ball, right? Generally, it's going to be in front of the ball 3 or 4 inches, right? Generally. So that'd be kind of like this. If my fist is the golf ball, that'd be where we want the arc to come down, right? So if we have the ball position here, it's going to be very, very difficult to get that, to not hit that fat, right? Or hit thin or top it, right? Because all of that's going to depend on how high the arc is, right? High or low the arc is. So I need it to be in front of and slightly below. So the ball position is going to play a big role in that. I find that a lot of people, they get a 5-iron in their hands and they're moving that ball position way up here. Well, it's going to be very, very difficult to not hit that fat or top it or thin it, right? If I'm hitting 8-iron or if I'm hitting a 5-iron, if it's a stock, normal kind of shot, that's where I'm putting it right there. If I'm trying to drive it in a little bit lower, I might put it a little bit more back there. If I'm trying to hit higher, I might put it a little bit more forward, right? If I'm trying to hit a high 8-iron, right, I might put it a little bit more forward, right, to allow the club to release just a little bit, to get a little bit more loft on it. I might stand a little bit taller as well to try to get it to release a little bit more, but I still want my club to bottom out in front of the ball, right? So ball position, that's number one. We don't want to overlook that because it's an easy thing to change. And a lot of people are kind of doing that not quite correctly. So that's number one. Number two, I would look at how your hips are moving in the backswing, right? So what I see with a lot of people who tend to struggle with chunk shots is they tend to slide their hips, right? So they'll move their hips like this, right?
If we slide our hips like, I'm going to exaggerate, but if I slide my hips like this, you can imagine how it's going to be very difficult for me to get the bottom of that arc to be here. There's two reasons why that's going to be difficult. Number one is it's hard for me to move in this direction, right? Because one, my leg is at an angle that I'm not going to have a lot of leverage to push in that direction, right? And then two, it's just a long way to go. That's a long way to get there. So what I'd like to see is, sure, I like a little move off the ball. I like it when you look at the best players. Typically, what you're going to see, if you were to draw a line on the outside of their hip, you will see a little move off the ball, and then you'll see as they get up to the top of the swing, their hip will separate from that line just slightly as they get up to the top, right? There'll be about a hand thickness of distance, right? So a quick drill that you can do to work on that would be a chair drill. Take a chair, have it resting on the side of your hip here, right? You're going to nudge it. That's your little move off the ball to start the backswing. Then as you get up to the top, you're going to create a small gap between your hip and the chair, and you want to get your momentum kind of moving toward the target, all right? So that would be kind of a big piece there. Easy drill that you can do if that's something that you're seeing that's causing fat shots. You doing the ball position thing and doing that may clear it up. Let's say that it doesn't. Let's say you are doing that well. Your ball position is great. You're not swaying your hips. There's no problems there, but you're still chunking the ball in the downswing. So the next thing I would look at is how your hips move in the downswing, right? Is your momentum moving toward the target in the downswing, right? So what we see a lot of times, maybe you're creating that gap, but your hips kind of go like this as you get up to the top. You still have a gap, right, between your hip and the chair, but your hips kind of go like this, right? So the hips are kind of tucking under and going that direction, right? So if I'm doing this and then I come down, I'm going to hang back and chunk it, right? So I want to make sure that my momentum is moving toward the target. That's what I want. So a good drill that you can do for that is the step drill. So this is a no ball kind of drill. You're going to start with your feet together. You're going to throw this club back. As you throw it back, you're going to step forward. That's going to get your momentum moving forward. You're going to land with your foot, and then that's when you're at the top of the swing. You're going to land with your foot. When you land, you're going to start your downswing, come around to a full finish. Get to where you can do that successfully, then do a normal stance practice swing where you replicate that same feeling. So I'm going to have a little move this way. Now I'm going to really feel like I'm going to imagine like I'm taking that step. I'm getting pressure into my lead foot. My momentum's going forward. I'm going to come all the way around to a full finish. Then what I'll do is I'll put a tee in the ground and I'll clip the tee. I'll do the same thing. I'll try to clip the tee, have my ground contact be where the tee is, right? Get to where I can do that. Then I'll put a ball on the tee. Get to where I can do that. Then I'll take the ball off the tee and just do it with the ball, right? So that would be the next piece. Let's say you're still chunking it. You're doing all those things correctly. You're still chunking it. The last thing, or there'd be two more things that I would look at. One would be shallowing out the club. If you are shallowing out the club too much, yes, you can shallow out the club too much. If you're swinging the club too much from the inside, that can cause chunks. That can cause fat shots, right? So if you imagine, I'm going to exaggerate this so that way we can have a better understanding. If I were to swing 45 degrees into out, right? So I'm swinging 45 degrees that way. My club is going to bottom out right here, right? That's going to be almost impossible to get the bottom of my swing to be in front of the ball, right? So if you're swinging too much from the inside, you're going to tend to chunk, thin, top the ball. So I would almost feel like you're coming over the top a little bit. Try to feel like you're swinging to the left. Try to hit some poles, almost like you're chopping down on the ball, and then tone it down a little bit. And you'll more than likely get those strikes to be a little bit better, right? The last piece would be the release. And these are all in order. I would look at these in this order. Again, I was talking about earlier about how a lot of people kind of skip over things in the top speed golf system and they go straight to the lag and the release part because those are the sexier parts of the top speed golf system. Look at this as the top speed golf chunking system, right? The release is the last part. I know it's probably the sexiest part of all the things that I've talked about so far, but it's not the most important thing, right? I would say the only time this would be the most important thing would be if you literally have backward shaftling. So if you're coming into contact and you are like this, right? Where the shaft at contact is leaning away from the target. If that is the case, then yes, I would recommend working on getting the club to release out in front more. But if you have the hands in front of the shaft, in front of the ball at any amount, right? If the shaft is leaning forward 1 degree, that is enough to be able to make ball first contact, right? So it's really just if it's backward shaft lean where it's a problem, where it's a major problem, right? Obviously, it would still be better if your shaft was leaning just slightly forward. It would be better if it was a little bit more forward, probably, but it's not. I wouldn't skip all the things that I just talked about, right, and go straight to that if that is the case, because that's not the major. That's not going to be the major issue. And also, this is the release is the most difficult to change of all the things that I just talked about, right? All the things I talked about to this point are so much easier to change than the release. So if it's the release, right, if you're still chunking, you're doing all those things correctly, right, and you're still chunking it, it's probably because you have backward shaft lean. And if you look at yourself on video, you have backward shaft lean, then I would definitely work on that. A drill that you can do, quick drill that you can do to help with the release would be to take an alignment stick, put it down the shaft, and make swings where you keep that stick from hitting you. Start with kind of some slower swings and then build up the faster swings. So that's kind of your complete guide to chunking the ball.
So Gene K says, on that chair drill, can you clarify the head position relative to the hips, back, and swing to the top at impact? So it's not so much about the head position. I want you to focus more on the angle of your torso. Because if the angle of your torso is in a good spot, just like we talked about in the Stable Fluid Spine course, then your head's going to be in the right spot. So focus on the torso, right? So we want our torso to be 6 to 8 degrees angled away from the target at the top of the swing. So at address, I'm going to set up with 6 to 8 degrees. Easy way to do that. Take the club, put it down the center of your body, tilt until that touches the inside of your leg there, right? So I'm putting it down the center of my body. I'm going to tilt. It's just slightly touching the inside of my leg. That's putting me in a perfect 6 to 8 degree angle away position. I'm going to go up to the top, and the overall angle of my body is going to be the same. So my head has maybe moved a little bit, right? But I'm really paying attention to the overall angle of my body. That's what I want to be in the same position. So I'm 6 to 8 degrees angled away. When I go up to the top of the swing, I want to see my body 6 to 8 degrees angled away. No problem, Gene. Glad to help. All right, we'll go ahead and wrap it up right there. Thanks, everybody, for joining me. We'll be back here tomorrow, Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to y'all next time.